From KUNC and the NPR network, this is In The NoCo. I'm Erin O'Toole. Colorado leaders have a unique plan to make cheaper prescription drugs available. It's starting to move forward after 7 years in development. But the chances of its success are uncertain. Governor Jared Polis says Americans are getting ripped off when it comes to prescription drug prices, and he's looking to Canada to help remedy the situation. The plan calls for importing drugs from Canada where prices are lower. The project just passed a key milestone for approval from federal regulators, but it still has some major hurdles to clear before it actually lowers the price of what's in your medicine cabinet. So, how would the plan work? And what are the odds of success? John Ingold covers healthcare for the Colorado Sun and wrote about the plan. Here's our conversation. Just to touch on this without getting bogged down in 10 words or less, why are drugs cheaper in Canada than here in Colorado?
Yeah, so I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on the Canadian drug market, but the big level view is that Canada has price controls on their prescription drug prices that we do not here in the United States.
Governor Polis talked about this issue very bluntly in your story. He said Americans are getting ripped off. How did Colorado leaders land on this strategy of lowering drug prices by importing medicine from Canada?
Yeah, so this is not an idea that's unique to Colorado. There's been other states that have also looked at importing drugs from Canada. Florida also has a program that they've attempted to stand up. They've actually got federal approval first before we did. But the idea is really simple, right? Which is we have higher cost prescription drugs here. There's lower cost drugs in Canada. Why don't we just go up there, buy them, bring them back to Colorado, sell them in our pharmacies at a lower price? And I think as the state has discovered, it's not actually that simple.
State officials did recently hit a milestone in getting federal regulators to approve the program. What was that milestone and how hard was it to get to this point?
So this is something that was passed by state lawmakers in 2019. So Colorado's been working on this for the entirety of the Polis administration. We're at 7 years now. The state first applied for federal approval in 2022. And that's what happened just recently is the federal government, the Food and Drug Administration, signed off on Colorado's plan to import drugs from Canada. Now, this is the first hurdle, and as you can imagine, the feds have a lot of safety concerns when it comes to you say you're going to go somewhere and bring drugs in and bring them into the U.S. supply chain. So the federal government really wanted to put Colorado through its paces, make sure it had a plan that was going to ensure that they were getting the genuine article wherever they went to go get it. They were going to be able to verify that and then relabel it so that it would actually note, hey, this is part of our importation program.
Let's talk about what the plan looks like. State officials are looking to import a list of 20 popular prescription drugs. How did they decide what's on the list?
Yeah, so this list has changed quite a bit over the years. You mentioned 20 drugs. Some of them are drugs you might recognize. Ozempic is on the list. There's a drug called Eliquis, which you may recognize from television ads. Some are a little bit more obscure. They're all really expensive here in the United States, and you can get anywhere from like, say, a 20 to maybe even up to a 60% discount by getting them in Canada. The state is trying to navigate a lot of different challenges and a lot of different competing interests in assembling this drug list. And one is that the Canadian government is not thrilled about the idea of U.S. states importing drugs to deal with their own pricing problems. You can imagine the United States is a much bigger country than Canada. If it became in vogue among U.S. states to go to Canada and buy drugs and bring them back here, you can imagine that Canada's drug supply would just be decimated really quickly. So the Canadian government won't allow drugs to be exported if they're either in shortage or it would create a shortage in Canada. So that's part of how the state ends up looking at which drugs to bring in. It's also looking at, okay, so which drugs are likely not going to be in shortage in Canada.
You mentioned Ozempic as one of the first drugs that this program hopes to import at a discount. How did officials settle on adding Ozempic to that list, given that it probably is one of the more popular prescription drugs right now?
Yeah, and Ozempic is just, again, for as popular as it is, it's shockingly expensive. We're talking somewhere between $270 to $500 per dose, depending on what dose you take. And the price after importing it from Canada could be knocked down to around $140 to $275. So that's like around a 50% decrease that Colorado would be looking at for Ozempic.
Significant. Mm-hmm. We should note this would only apply to people with private insurance rather than Medicaid recipients. You heard from several private insurers who were not interested in being part of this project. John, what was their rationale?
Yeah, so just to be clear, I didn't hear from them directly. The state has been corresponding with them for a while now and has been reaching out to drug makers to say, like, hey, would you participate in this program? Because the state had a chicken and egg problem in that the federal government didn't want to approve the program until it knew who are you going to be working with and how are you actually going to make sure you're getting drugs from them that are the real deal. Without a federal approval, Colorado felt like drug makers were less likely to want to work with them. But in general, the pharmaceutical industry has been opposed to this. Now, you can imagine a lot of cynical reasons why the pharmaceutical industry might be opposed to this. They would say they think it can't be done safely. They worry about, again, hurting the drug supply up in Canada. They feel like importation programs are not the appropriate solution. And the reason Colorado has to work with the manufacturers is the pharmaceutical supply chain is just like massively complex and so many different players and pieces in there. But the manufacturers in Canada have inserted clauses into their contracts that would prohibit their distributors from exporting these drugs to the United States. So you have to get the manufacturers to sign on, even though you may not be working directly with them to get the drugs, you'll be going to a distributor up in Canada.
As you mentioned earlier, Colorado is one of two states trying to import cheaper drugs from Canada. The other one is Florida, whose program has stalled. What went wrong there in Florida?
You know, it's the same challenge. Got federal approval and then need to be able to take that next step. Get the okay from the Canadian government and then get some manufacturers and distributors in Canada who are willing to work with them. And that's just really the hard part. Colorado has, to my knowledge, in reaching out to well over a dozen drug manufacturers, has never found a manufacturer who said, oh, we're interested. We want to work with you on this. And obviously, again, without their approval, you can't bring the drugs back into the United States.
Yeah. Given these giant hurdles, success is far from certain for this program. Did Governor Polis offer any predictions about whether he thinks the program will succeed?
If you've ever had a chance to talk to the governor or listen to him, he is a pretty optimistic kind of guy. So he was very upbeat and said, now we have our federal approval and we're going out and doing another round of outreach to manufacturers. And we're really looking for ones who want to be innovative and work with us. We'll see these next few months if the state gets some buy-in, and then we'll see what they do. But of course, the Polis administration is in its final months as is. So there's partly a question of what the next governor wants to do with this program.
John Ingold, healthcare reporter for the Colorado Sun, talking about a plan to lower Colorado drug prices with imported drugs from Canada. We'll put a link to John's story in our show notes and at KUNC.org. That's it today for In The NoCo. I'm Erin O'Toole. Thanks so much for listening.